Tractate Beitzah, Talmud Bavli Tractate Beitzah, page 17a, top of the page, with the words Hainu, Kil, Kula, etc. This is the corruption that might result from a ruling that renders it prohibited to prepare an Eruv the day before. Therefore, this cannot serve as proof of the conclusive ruling. Rava said that Rav Chisda said that Rav Huna said. The halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi to prohibit one from preparing either type of Eruv. One may not prepare an Eruv either for courtyards or for boundaries, as the halacha is in accordance with Rabbi Elazar's version of the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. The sages taught the following Beitzah. In the case of a festival that occurs on Shabbat, Beit Shammai say, one must recite an Amidah prayer that includes 8 blessings, inserting 2 additional blessings between the standard opening 3 and concluding 3. Between the standard opening 3 and concluding 3. And as for the 2 middle blessings, one recites one for Shabbat as an independent blessing, and a second for the festival as an independent blessing. And Beit Hillel say one must pray an Amidah comprising only 7 blessings. In other words, the 3 opening ones, the 3 concluding ones, and one in between. One begins the middle blessing with Shabbat and concludes it with Shabbat, and he recites a passage referring to the sanctity of the day of the festival in the middle. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says he even concludes this blessing with mention of both Shabbat and festival, saying, who sanctify the Shabbat, the Jewish people, and the seasons. A Tana taught a Beitzah before Ravina with a slightly different reading. He concludes the blessing with, who sanctifies the Jewish people, Shabbat, and the seasons. Ravina said to the Tana, is that to say that the Jewish people sanctify Shabbat? Isn't Shabbat already sanctified from the 6 days of creation? Every 7th day is automatically Shabbat, without the need for any declaration on the part of the Jewish people. Rather, amend it and say as follows, who sanctify the Shabbat, the Jewish people, and the seasons, as the Jewish people indeed sanctify the new moon and festival days. Rav Yosef said the halacha is with regard to the conclusion of the blessing is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, as the difficulty was resolved by Ravina. The sages taught the following Beitzah. In the case of Shabbat that occurs on a new moon, or on one of the intermediate days of the festival, for the evening, morning, and afternoon prayers, one prays in his usual manner, reciting 7 blessings in the Amidah, and recites a passage pertaining to the event of the day. For example, in other words, may there rise and come a Yalav during the blessing of the temple service, known as Ritzei. And if he did not recite it, he is required to return to the beginning of the Amidah prayer and repeat it. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees and says this passage is recited during the blessing of Thanksgiving, known as Modim. And in the additional prayer, one begins the fourth blessing, the special blessing for the additional service, with Shabbat, and concludes it with Shabbat, and recites a passage pertaining to the sanctity of the day, of the new moon, or the festival in the middle. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, disagree and say whenever one is required to recite the 7 blessings, whether in the evening, morning, or afternoon prayers, he begins the 4th blessing with Shabbat and concludes it with Shabbat, and recites a passage referring to the sanctity of the day, of the new moon, or the festival in the middle. Rav Huna said, the halakha is not in accordance with the opinion of that pair of scholars. Rather, it is in accordance with the opinion of the first Tana, that in the evening, morning, and afternoon prayers, one recites the usual 7 blessings and recites a passage pertaining to the event of the day during the blessing of the temple service. Rav Chia bar Ashi said that Rav said, if a person forgot to place an Eruv before a festival occurring on a Thursday and Friday in the diaspora, he may act as follows. He may place an Eruv for the joining of Shabbat boundaries on the first festival day for the next. In other words, on the first festival day for the second festival day, and keep day kept in the diaspora based on a doubt as to which day is the real day of the festival, and stipulate as follows. If today is in fact the festival, when tomorrow is a weekday on which I may walk as far as I wish in all directions, and if today is a weekday and tomorrow is the festival, I hereby place an Eruv for the joining of Shabbat boundaries for tomorrow. On the following day, he makes a similar stipulation with the same Eruv, so that he will have an Eruv for Shabbat. Rava said, a person may place an Eruv for the joining of cooked foods on the first festival day for the next day and stipulate as follows. If today is a weekday and tomorrow is the festival, this is my joining of cooked foods, so that I may rely on it to cook tomorrow for Shabbat. And if today is in fact the festival and tomorrow is a weekday, I may cook tomorrow on a regular weekday. The Gemara comments with regard to the one who said this halakha concerning Eruv for the joining of Shabbat boundaries, all the more so would he permit one to act in this manner concerning an Eruv for the joining of cooked foods. On the other hand, the one who said this halakha with regard to an Eruv for the joining of cooked foods spoke only with regard to the joining of cooked foods. However, as for an Eruv for the joining of Shabbat boundaries, it is not permitted. The Gemara asks, what is the reason for this difference? It is that they did not permit the acquisition of residence on a day of rest, even in a case of uncertainty. However, with regard to an Eruv for the joining of cooked foods, since it is merely symbolic, it is permitted for the sake of the honor of Shabbat. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught in a Beitzah. One may not bake bread on one festival day for the next. In other words, on the first festival day for the second festival day kept in the diaspora. Nevertheless, actually, they said the following established halacha. A woman may fill an entire pot with meat to cook on a festival, although she requires only one piece for that day, and all the remainder will be for the following day. Similarly, a baker may fill an entire barrel with water in order to heat it up, although he requires only a jug of hot water. But with regard to baking, he may bake only that which he requires for that day. The Beitzah continues. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, a woman may fill the entire oven with bread, although she does not intend to use it all on that day, because bread bakes well when the oven is full. A full oven has less empty space and is therefore hotter. Consequently, filling the oven with bread serves not only to provide bread for the next day, but also to improve the bread to be eaten that same day. Rava said the halakha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. A dilemma was raised before the sages. In the case of one who did not prepare an eruv for the joining of cooked foods, is he prohibited from cooking for Shabbat, and his flour is likewise prohibited, meaning that none of his food may be prepared for Shabbat? Or perhaps only he is prohibited from performing this type of labor, but his flour is not prohibited? The Gemara asks, what is the practical halachic difference that emerges from this question? The Gemara explains there is a difference with respect to whether or not he must transfer ownership of his flour to others. If you say he is prohibited and his flour is also prohibited, he must transfer his flour to others so that they're able to bake for him if they so desire. But if you say that only he is prohibited, but his flour is not prohibited, he need not transfer his flour to others, as they may bake for him even if the flour is not theirs. The Gemara asks, what then is the halakha? The Gemara answers, come in here. A resolution from the following Beitzah. One who did not prepare an eruv for the joining of cooked foods on a festival eve may neither bake, nor cook, nor insulate food on the festival for a Shabbat that occurs on the following day, neither for himself nor for others, and others may neither bake nor cook for him. What should he do so that he will have food to eat on Shabbat? He must transfer his flour to others, and they may then bake and cook for him. Learn from here, from the fact that the Beitzah states that he must transfer his flour to others, that he is prohibited, and his flour is also prohibited. The Gemara concludes, indeed, learn from here that this is the case. Another dilemma was raised before the sages. In the case of one who transgressed this prohibition and baked on a festival for Shabbat, without having placed an Eruv for the joining of cooked foods on the eve of the festival, what is the halacha? Is it permitted to partake of his bread and his cooking? The Gemara suggests coming here a resolution to this question from the following Beitzah. With regard to one who did not prepare an Eruv for the joining of cooked foods, what should he do so that he will have food to eat on Shabbat? He must transfer his flour to others, and they may then bake and cook for him.